The dust cloud on the western horizon had been growing smaller for 3 hours now, and Penelope Turner knew with absolute certainty that the wagon train was not coming back for her. She stood beside the broken wheel of her family's wagon, her calico dress stained with grease and sweat, watching the last remnants of her traveling companions disappear into the vastness of the Nevada territory. It was August 1876, and she had just turned 21 3 weeks ago, a birthday celebrated with dried apples and weak coffee around a campfire that now felt like a lifetime away. The wheel had cracked on a rock in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between Virginia City and what the wagon master had called the California Trail. Her father had died of cholera 2 months back in Kansas, and her mother had followed him just 3 weeks later. Penelope had pressed on with the Hendersons, a family from Missouri who had agreed to let her travel alongside them in exchange for helping with their 4 children. But when her wagon wheel had splintered beyond immediate repair, Mrs. Henderson had looked at her with something like pity and something like relief. "We cannot wait," Mr. Henderson had said, not meeting her eyes. "The snows come early in the Sierra Nevada. We have our own children to think of." She had nodded, understanding even as her heart sank. The trail was unforgiving, and sentiment was a luxury few could afford. They had left her with some supplies, a rifle with limited ammunition, and promises to send help from the next settlement. She knew those promises were empty even as they were made. The Hendersons would reach California and forget all about the orphaned girl they had left in the sagebrush. Now the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if Penelope had not been so terrified. She had never spent a night alone in the wilderness. She had never been truly alone at all, come to think of it. Even after her parents died, there had been the constant noise and presence of the wagon train, the comfort of other people nearby. She looked at the supplies they had left her. A canvas tarp, 2 blankets, some hardtack, dried meat, a canteen of water, a tin pot, and the rifle. The wagon itself was useless with its broken wheel, but it would provide some shelter. She began gathering sagebrush and dried grass, building it up against the side of the wagon to create a windbreak. Her hands moved mechanically through the tasks her father had taught her during their journey west. Start a fire, conserve water, stay alert. The sun touched the horizon as she finally got a small fire going with her precious matches. She rationed herself to 3 pieces of hardtack and some dried beef, washing it down with careful sips of water. The temperature was already dropping, the desert heat giving way to the cold of high-elevation nights. She wrapped herself in both blankets and sat with her back against the wagon wheel, the rifle across her lap, watching the fire and trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong. She must have dozed off despite her fear, because she woke with a start to the sound of hoofbeats. Her heart hammered as she scrambled to her feet, raising the rifle with shaking hands. It was still dark, though the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten with the promise of dawn. A single rider was approaching, visible as a dark shape against the starlit desert. "Stay back," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am armed." The rider slowed but did not stop. As he drew closer, the dying embers of her fire gave just enough light for her to make out a tall man on a large bay horse. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and what looked like a canvas duster. His hands were clearly visible, resting on the pommel of his saddle. "Easy there," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I mean you no harm, miss. Saw your fire from my land. This is private property, but I am guessing you did not know that." "The wagon train left me," Penelope said, not lowering the rifle. "My wheel broke." The man dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. In the growing light of dawn, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes that looked dark in the dim light. He was dusty from riding but carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in this harsh land. "My name is Benjamin Nash," he said. "I run a ranch about 5 miles south of here. Been tracking a few head of cattle that wandered off, and I saw your smoke." "When did they leave you?" "Yesterday afternoon." Penelope finally lowered the rifle, though she kept it close. Something about this man seemed honest, but she had learned to be cautious. "They said they would send help from the next town." Benjamin made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snort of derision. "The next town is Sierra City, and that is a good 40 miles west of here. Even if they do send someone, it would be days before help arrived. You cannot stay out here alone. I do not have much choice. You do now." He looked at the broken wagon wheel, then back at her. "I can send some of my men back with a wagon to collect your things, but that wheel is beyond field repair. You will need to come back to the ranch. You can stay in the main house until we figure out what to do with you." Penelope stiffened. "I am not some stray dog you can decide what to do with." Even in the dim light, she saw his expression soften. "No, you are not. I apologize. That came out wrong. What I meant is, you cannot survive out here alone, and I cannot in good conscience leave you. You can stay at my ranch as a guest until we can arrange safe passage for you to wherever you are heading." "California," she said quietly. "I was going to San Francisco. I have an aunt there, supposedly. I have an address." Benjamin nodded. "Then we will get you to California. But right now the sun is coming up, and you look like you have not slept properly. Will you accept my help?" Penelope studied him in the growing light. She had few options, and he was right that she could not survive alone in the desert. There was something straightforward in his manner that made her want to trust him, even though her mother had warned her about trusting strangers, especially men. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you, Mr. Nash." "Benjamin," he corrected. "And you are Penelope Turner." "People called me Penny, but I prefer Penelope." "Penelope it is." He moved to kick dirt over the remains of her fire. "Can you ride?" "Not very well." "You will ride with me then. The horse can carry double for 5 miles easily enough." He began gathering her few possessions, tying them to his saddle with practiced efficiency. When everything was secured, he mounted the bay and extended his hand down to her. "Put your foot on mine and I will pull you up." It took some awkward maneuvering, but soon Penelope found herself seated behind Benjamin on the horse, her arms wrapped around his waist to keep from falling. She could feel the warmth of him through his shirt, the solid strength of his back. It was improper, riding this close to a strange man, but propriety seemed like a distant concern when the alternative was dying alone in the desert. They rode as the sun climbed higher, turning the desert landscape from gray to gold. Benjamin kept the horse to a steady walk, and Penelope found herself noticing details about him. He smelled of leather and sage and something else, maybe pine soap. He sat easy in the saddle, moving with the horse's gait in a way that spoke of a lifetime of riding. He did not try to make conversation, seeming content with the silence, which suited Penelope just fine. She was too tired and overwhelmed to manage small talk. The ranch appeared gradually, starting with fence lines, and then scattered cattle grazing on the sparse desert grass. The land here was dotted with more vegetation than where she had been left, suggesting the presence of water. As they crested a low rise, she saw the main compound spread out in a shallow valley. There was a large house built of wood and stone, a substantial barn, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. It was more prosperous looking than she had expected, speaking of years of hard work and success. Several men were working in the main yard as they rode in. They looked up with curiosity at the sight of their boss with a woman riding double. Benjamin ignored their stares, riding straight to the main house and dismounting before helping Penelope down. "Miguel," he called to one of the men, "take the horse and then round up a couple of the boys. We have a broken-down wagon about 5 miles north-northeast, just this side of the old creek bed. Bring it back along with everything in it." A stocky man with graying hair nodded. "Yes, boss. Should we try to fix the wheel? Not worth it from what I saw. Just bring everything back." Benjamin guided Penelope up the steps to the wide porch that wrapped around the front of the house. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable. The main room had a large stone fireplace, solid furniture that looked handmade but well crafted, and windows that let in plenty of light. It was clean in the way that spoke of regular attention, though it lacked the touches a woman would bring. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, comes in 3 days a week," Benjamin said, apparently noticing her looking around. "Today is not one of those days, so you will have to forgive the state of things. The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right. There is a washroom at the end of the hall with a tub if you want to clean up. I will have one of the men bring in water for a bath." "Thank you," Penelope said. "You are being very kind." Benjamin shrugged, looking almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It is what anyone would do. You are welcome to any food in the kitchen. I need to check on some things with the men, but I will be back by noon. Make yourself at home." He left, and Penelope stood alone in the main room of the ranch house, feeling strange and displaced. Everything had happened so fast. Just yesterday she had been with the wagon train, surrounded by familiar faces even if they were not quite friends. Now she was in a stranger's house, alone in a way she had never been before, her future uncertain. She climbed the stairs and found the guest room. It was simple but comfortable, with a real bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. The window looked out over the ranch yard and the desert beyond. She stood there for a moment, watching the men go about their work, trying to process everything that had happened. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss," a voice called. "Mr. Benjamin said to bring you hot water for a bath." "Come in," she said. 2 young ranch hands entered, carrying buckets of steaming water. They were polite, calling her madam and not meeting her eyes, filling the tub in the washroom before disappearing back downstairs. Penelope waited until she heard the front door close before she went to the bathroom and locked the door. The bath was heaven. She had not been properly cleaned since leaving Virginia City weeks ago. The warm water eased aches she had not known she had, and she scrubbed away layers of dust and sweat and the grime of the trail. Her dress was in poor condition, stained and torn in places, but it was the only one she had until her trunk was retrieved from the wagon. She washed it as best she could in the bathwater and hung it to dry, wrapping herself in a blanket she found in the cupboard. Back in the guest room, she lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment. She fell asleep immediately, exhausted by fear and travel and the sudden safety of a real bed. When she woke, the sun was past its zenith, slanting through the window at an angle that suggested early afternoon. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Her dress was still damp but wearable, so she put it on and made her way downstairs. The smell of coffee and something cooking led her to the kitchen. Benjamin was there, standing at the stove, which was such an unexpected sight that she stopped in the doorway. He looked over his shoulder and gave a slight smile. "You are awake. I was starting to wonder if I should check on you. You slept for almost 4 hours. I am sorry. I did not mean to sleep so long. You needed it." He gestured to the table. "Sit. I am making stew." It is about the only thing I can cook that is actually edible." Penelope sat, watching as he moved around the kitchen with surprising competence. "You do not have a cook. Mrs. Cheng cooks when she is here, and sometimes the men make something in the bunkhouse and bring me a plate. But I have been a bachelor for a long time. I learned to fend for myself." He poured her a cup of coffee and set it in front of her. "Miguel brought your trunk back. It is in the main room. The wagon was too damaged to bring, but they salvaged everything else. Thank you." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful. "I know I have said it before, but truly, thank you. I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not come along." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, stirring the pot on the stove. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "How old are you, Penelope, if you do not mind me asking?" 21. "I turned of age on the trail, and your parents, dead, both of them. Cholera took my father in Kansas, and my mother followed him 3 weeks later. I think she died of grief as much as sickness." Penelope stared into her coffee. "They sold everything we had in Pennsylvania to make this trip. My father was convinced we would make our fortune in California. Now they are buried in unmarked graves along the trail, and I am alone. What about this aunt in San Francisco, my mother's sister?" They had not spoken in 15 years after some family argument I was never told about, but she is the only family I have left, so I have to try. Benjamin brought 2 bowls of stew to the table and sat across from her. "Eat. You need to keep your strength up." The stew was simple but good, full of beef and vegetables. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Benjamin spoke again. "I have been thinking about your situation. Sierra City is the closest town, but it is rough and not a place for a young woman alone. The next wagon train through here probably will not come for weeks, maybe months. Winter comes early in the mountains, and most people have already made their crossing by now. So what do I do?" Penelope tried to keep the desperation out of her voice. "You could stay here," Benjamin said slowly, as if the thought was occurring to him as he spoke. "Work for your keep until spring. Mrs. Chen is getting older and has been talking about wanting less work. The house could use proper managing, and the men could use better meals than what they make for themselves. It would give you a safe place to stay and time to figure out what you want to do." Penelope looked at him across the table. In the better light of the kitchen, she could see him more clearly. He had brown eyes that looked almost amber in the sunlight, and there was kindness in his face despite its hard angles. He was handsome in a rugged way, she realized, but more than that, he seemed decent. Still, the situation was highly improper. "I could not," she said. "It would not be right, me living here with you unmarried. People would talk." "People are going to talk no matter what," Benjamin said practically. "And the alternative is you trying to make it to California alone with no money and no protection. At least here you would be safe. The men know better than to bother you, and Mrs. Chen will still come by regularly, so there will be another woman around some of the time." He had a point. Penelope had about $15 to her name, barely enough for stage fare, let alone food and lodging. And she had no skills that would help her find work in a rough mining town. At least here she could work honestly and save money while having shelter and safety. "All right," she said, "but I will earn my keep properly. I am a good cook and I know how to manage a household. You will not regret taking me in." "I do not think I will," Benjamin said, and there was something warm in his voice that made her cheeks flush. Over the next weeks, Penelope settled into life at the ranch. She woke early each morning to make breakfast for Benjamin and the ranch hands. Substantial meals of eggs and bacon and biscuits that earned her appreciative comments from the men. She scrubbed and cleaned the house until it gleamed, mended clothes and linens, and began organizing the chaos of Benjamin's accounts and paperwork. The work was hard but satisfying in a way that the aimless traveling had not been. Benjamin was gone most days, riding the range with his men, checking on cattle, mending fences, and doing the 1,000 tasks that running a ranch required. But in the evenings, he would return to the house, and they would sit together over supper, talking about their days. Penelope found herself looking forward to those evenings, to the sound of his voice, and the way he listened when she spoke as if what she said actually mattered. She learned about his life in fragments. He had come west from Tennessee after the war, too young to fight but old enough to remember the devastation it brought. He had worked as a ranch hand for years, saving every penny until he could buy this land. That had been 8 years ago, and he had built it into one of the more successful operations in the area through sheer determination and hard work. "Were you ever married?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "No," he said. "I came close once, back in Tennessee before I left. But she married someone else, someone with better prospects. Probably did her a favor. This life is hard. But you love it." "I do," he admitted. "I love the land and the work and the freedom of it. I love that what I build here is mine, earned by my own hands. That matters to me." "It would matter to anyone," Penelope said. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "I admire what you have done here, building something from nothing. That takes courage." "So does heading west alone after losing everything," Benjamin said, looking at her. "You have your own kind of courage, Penelope." The way he said her name sent a little shiver through her. She was becoming increasingly aware of him, of his presence and his proximity. Sometimes their hands would brush as they passed dishes at dinner, and she would feel that touch for hours afterward. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, and her heart would beat a little faster. October arrived with cooler weather and the first hints of winter in the high country. Miguel and the other hands began preparing for the cold months, ensuring the cattle had adequate shelter and that supplies were laid in. Mrs. Cheng came by less frequently as her arthritis worsened, leaving Penelope to manage more of the household on her own. She did not mind. The ranch was beginning to feel like home in a way nowhere else ever had. One evening, Benjamin came in from a long day to find the house filled with the smell of baking bread and roasting chicken. The table was set with actual linens she had found in a chest and laundered, and there were wildflowers in a jar in the center. Penelope had found a dress in her trunk that was less worn than her everyday clothes, and she had taken time with her hair, pinning it up properly for the first time in weeks. Benjamin stopped in the doorway, looking at the scene with an expression of such surprise and something else, something deeper, that Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "What is all this?" he asked. "It has been exactly 2 months since you found me," Penelope said. "I wanted to thank you properly. I know I say it often, but I do not think you realize how much you have given me. Not just shelter and safety, but purpose. I was so lost, Benjamin. You gave me a place to belong." He crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of her. They were close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He reached out and touched her cheek gently, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. "You have given me something too," he said quietly. "I did not realize how lonely I was until you were here. Coming home to a dark, empty house every night, I had gotten used to it. But now when I ride in and see the lights on and smell food cooking and know you are here, it feels like coming home in a way it never did before." "Benjamin," she whispered, not sure what she meant to say. He bent his head and kissed her, softly at first, questioning. Penelope rose on her toes and kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating under her palm, as fast as her own. The kiss deepened, and she felt something inside her unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "I did not plan that," he said. "I am glad you did it anyway." He laughed, a real laugh, deep and full of joy. "Penelope Turner, you have completely turned my life upside down. Is that a bad thing? Not even a little bit." They ate dinner, but Penelope barely tasted the food she had spent hours preparing. She was too aware of Benjamin across the table, of the way he looked at her now with something like wonder in his eyes. After the meal, he took her hand. "Walk with me," he asked. They walked out into the cool October night, the sky overhead blazing with stars. The ranch was quiet, the hands already turned in for the night. Benjamin led her to a bench near the barn where they could sit and look out over the darkened land. "I need to be honest with you," Benjamin said, still holding her hand. "About what I am feeling, about what I want." "All right," Penelope said, her heart hammering. "I think I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Actually, I think I have been falling in love with you since I pulled you up on my horse 2 months ago. I know it is too soon and may be inappropriate given that you work for me and are living in my house, but I cannot keep pretending what I feel is just gratitude or friendship." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I am falling in love with you too. I tried not to. I told myself I was just grateful that I was confused, but it is more than that. So much more." "Then marry me," Benjamin said, turning to face her fully. "I know we have not known each other long, but time does not matter when something is right. Marry me, Penelope. Stay here not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. Build this life with me." She should have been cautious. She should have taken time to think about it. But sitting there under the stars with this good, kind man who had saved her life and then shown her what it meant to have a partner, there was only one answer. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no question. This was a kiss of promise, of commitment, of a future they would build together. They were married 3 weeks later in Sierra City. It was a small ceremony, attended by Miguel and some of the other ranch hands, Mrs. Chen, and a few of the more respectable citizens of the rough mining town. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that Benjamin had insisted on buying her from the general store, and she carried a bouquet of late-season wildflowers. Benjamin wore his best suit and looked so handsome her breath caught when she saw him waiting for her. The preacher was an elderly man who had seen countless weddings in his years serving the mining camps and ranches of Nevada. He spoke briefly about the sanctity of marriage and the challenges they would face, then asked them to speak their vows. When Benjamin slipped the simple gold band on her finger and said, "With this ring, I thee wed," Penelope felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit back together. The wedding night was tender and sweet. Benjamin was patient and gentle, taking time to ease her nervousness, and Penelope discovered that physical intimacy with a man you loved was something beautiful and profound. Afterward, she lay in his arms in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest. Snow came early, dusting the desert in white and making the work harder. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and laughter and love. Penelope threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning from Benjamin how to read the weather and understand the cattle. She improved her riding, becoming confident enough to accompany him on some of his shorter trips around the property. She also discovered she had a talent for the business side of ranching. Benjamin's record-keeping had been haphazard at best, but she organized everything, tracked expenses and income, and began identifying ways they could be more profitable. Benjamin relied on her advice increasingly, valuing her clear-headed business sense. "You are smarter than I am," he told her one evening as they reviewed the books together. "That is not true, but I think we are smart in different ways, and together we are stronger than either of us alone." "I like the sound of that," he said, pulling her into his lap. "Together." Spring arrived with a rush of green across the desert. The cattle had survived the winter well, and there were dozens of new calves. Penelope spent hours watching them play in the pastures, already imagining the children she hoped to have with Benjamin. They had been trying, but so far there was no sign of pregnancy. She tried not to be disappointed, knowing these things took time. In April, a wagon train came through, the first since the previous fall. Some of the travelers stopped at the ranch to trade for supplies, and Penelope found herself talking to the women about their journey west. They seemed tired and hopeful and scared, much as she must have looked a year ago. She thought about how much had changed, how the disaster of being left behind had led her to the greatest happiness she had ever known. That night, she told Benjamin, "I think I need to let go of the idea of going to San Francisco, of finding my aunt." "Are you sure?" he asked. "I know that was important to you. It was when I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. But now I have you and this life we are building. This is where I belong. The past is past." Benjamin held her close. "I will support whatever you decide. But I am glad you are choosing to stay, not because you have to, but because you want to." "I have never wanted anything more," she said honestly. In June, Penelope finally missed her monthly time and felt the familiar queasiness that the married women on the wagon train had whispered about. She waited another month to be sure before telling Benjamin. She found him in the barn one evening checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe. "Benjamin," she said, unable to keep the smile off her face, "I have news." He looked up, and something in her expression must have told him because his eyes went wide. "Are you?" "I am, with child. We are going to have a baby." He swept her up, spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. When?" "I think sometime in February, based on my calculations." "February," he repeated as if committing it to memory. Then he set her down gently, looking worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working so hard? We should get the doctor from Sierra City to examine you." "Benjamin, I am fine. Women have babies all the time. But yes, we should have the doctor come, just to be sure everything is as it should be." The doctor came 2 weeks later, examined Penelope, and pronounced her in excellent health. "Keep doing what you are doing," he advised. "Good food, moderate exercise, and do not let anyone tell you that you are fragile. Women's bodies are made for this." As summer turned to fall and then winter again, Penelope's belly grew round. She moved more slowly but continued to manage the household and help with the ranch accounts. Benjamin was attentive to the point of being comically overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing anything that required the slightest exertion. She bore his fussing with good humor, understanding it came from love and excitement. In late January, as snow lay thick on the ground, Penelope felt the first pains of labor. Mrs. Chen had come to stay at the ranch for the birth, and she took charge immediately, sending Benjamin to boil water and fetch clean linens while she helped Penelope upstairs. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next day. Benjamin paced outside the door, ignoring Miguel's attempts to distract him with ranch business. Finally, as dawn broke on a cold February morning, a baby's cry filled the house. Mrs. Chen opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy." Benjamin rushed into the room. Penelope lay exhausted in the bed, her hair damp with sweat, but she was smiling as she held a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Benjamin, meet your son," she said softly. He approached slowly, almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small, mewling sounds. Benjamin reached out one finger and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it reflexively. "He is perfect," Benjamin whispered. "You are perfect. How do you feel?" "Tired, sore, but happy. So happy." "What should we name him?" Benjamin asked, still staring at his son in wonder. They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Now, looking at this new life they had created together, Penelope knew. "James," she said, "after my father, James William Nash." "James William Nash," Benjamin repeated. "That is a strong name. Hello, James. Welcome to the world." The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and the constant demands of a newborn. But they were also filled with moments of incredible joy. James's first smile, the way he started to recognize their faces, his attempts to grab at everything within reach. Benjamin was a devoted father, taking his turn walking the floor with the baby at night, making faces to elicit those precious smiles. Penelope watched her husband with their son and felt her heart might burst with how much she loved them both. This life they had built together, this family, was more than she had ever dreamed of during those dark days on the wagon train. As James grew from a baby into a toddler, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. Their second son, Thomas Benjamin Nash, was born in the spring when James was nearly 2 years old. Thomas was quieter than his older brother, more thoughtful, content to watch the world around him with serious dark eyes. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Benjamin expanded the herd and bought additional land. Penelope kept the books and managed their finances, proving to have a shrewd head for business. They built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. When James was 5 and Thomas was 3, Penelope gave birth to their first daughter, whom they named Catherine Rose. She was a tiny thing with her mother's red gold hair and her father's brown eyes, and she had both her parents wrapped around her little finger from the moment she arrived. The children grew up running wild on the ranch, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, helping with age-appropriate chores, and being educated by their mother in the evenings. Penelope taught them to read and write and do figures, and Benjamin taught them about the land and the animals and the value of hard work. Sierra City grew over the years from a rough mining camp to a more settled town with a proper school and church. The Nash family became pillars of the community. Benjamin served on the town council, and Penelope organized charitable efforts to help new settlers and those in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure no one in their community faced that fate if she could help it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Penelope back to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. The broken wagon was long gone, but they both remembered exactly where it had been. They stood there together in the desert, their hands clasped, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. "You ever regret it?" Benjamin asked. "That they left you behind?" Penelope was quiet for a moment, thinking about the terror of that day, the certainty that she was going to die alone in the wilderness. Then she thought about everything that had come after. The love, the family, the life she had built. "No," she said firmly. "I do not regret it at all. If they had not left me, I never would have met you. I never would have had this life. Everything I went through, all the pain and loss, it led me here. To you, to our family, how could I regret that? I think about it sometimes," Benjamin admitted. "About how easily I could have missed you. If I had gone a different direction looking for those cattle, if I had decided to wait until morning, if I had ridden past without investigating your fire. We came so close to never meeting at all. But we did meet," Penelope said, squeezing his hand. And everything that has happened since has been the best years of my life. You saved me, Benjamin, not just from dying in the desert, but from a life of loneliness and purposelessness. You gave me a home and a family and a partnership. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, he said. Maybe more. I was half alive before you came, just going through the motions. You brought light and warmth and love into my life. You made the house a home. You gave me children and a real family. You are my partner in every sense of the word. They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, the same way they had on that first night when he had proposed. 10 years of marriage, of building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating triumphs, all because a wagon wheel had broken at exactly the right time and place. As they rode back to the ranch together, Penelope could see lights in the windows of their home. Mrs. Chen had agreed to watch the children for the evening, giving them this time alone. Inside, James and Thomas and Catherine would be getting ready for bed, probably giving the housekeeper a hard time about it. Tomorrow there would be breakfast to make and lessons to teach, and 1,000 tasks that came with running a ranch and raising a family. But right now, in this moment, riding beside her husband under a canopy of stars, Penelope felt nothing but profound gratitude. She had set out for California expecting to find her fortune. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found love, belonging, and purpose. The ranch came into view, lights warm and welcoming in the gathering darkness. This was home. Not San Francisco, not Pennsylvania where she had been born, but this patch of Nevada desert that she and Benjamin had turned into something beautiful. Here, where she had once been lost and alone, she had found everything she had been searching for. Years continued to pass in steady progression. The children grew tall and strong. James developed his father's love of the land and his mother's business sense. Thomas showed an aptitude for medicine that surprised them all, spending hours reading every medical book they could obtain. Catherine was fearless and stubborn, insisting on learning everything her brothers learned, refusing to be limited by expectations of what girls could do. When a new doctor established practice in Sierra City, Thomas began studying with him, eventually leaving the ranch to attend medical school in San Francisco. It was hard to see him go, but Penelope and Benjamin were proud of his ambition and determination. James stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father, learning everything he could about cattle and land management. He married a school teacher named Sarah, a sensible young woman who Penelope adored, and they gave Benjamin and Penelope their first grandchildren. Catherine shocked everyone by falling in love with Miguel's grandson, Roberto, who had come to work on the ranch as a young man. There were those in Sierra City who disapproved of the match, but Benjamin and Penelope supported their daughter wholeheartedly. They had built their own life on love and mutual respect, and they would not deny Catherine the same. Miguel had passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, and his loss had been deeply felt by the whole ranch. He had been there from the beginning, one of the first men Benjamin had hired, and he had become family over the years. Now his grandson carried on his legacy, working the land and building a future with Catherine. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch. Thomas came from San Francisco, where he was establishing his medical practice. James and Sarah brought their 3 children. Catherine and Roberto, married just a year, announced they were expecting their first child. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Penelope and Benjamin slipped outside to sit on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. Benjamin pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. 20 years, Benjamin said wonderingly. It seems impossible. It feels like just yesterday I pulled you up on my horse. And yet it also feels like we have been together forever, Penelope said. Like there was never a time when we were not us. I love you, Penelope Nash, Benjamin said. More today than the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than today. I love you too, she replied. My rescuer, my partner, my love. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The ranch spread out around them, the product of years of work and love and determination. Inside the house, their family slept safely. This was the legacy they were building together, not just land and cattle, but a family rooted in love and respect and commitment. Penelope thought about the girl she had been, standing beside a broken wagon, watching her last hope disappear over the horizon. She had been so scared, so certain her life was over. She could never have imagined then what the future held. That the dusty rancher who appeared at dawn would become the love of her life. That she would build a home and a family in the middle of the Nevada desert. That she would find not just survival, but joy and purpose and deep, abiding happiness. What are you thinking about? Benjamin asked, feeling her shift against him. How grateful I am, she said, for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here, to you, to this life. I am the grateful one, Benjamin said. You took a chance on a solitary rancher who had almost forgotten what it meant to hope for more than just getting through the day. You showed me what life could be when it is shared with someone you love. More years passed, bringing changes and challenges. The railroad came through Nevada, making transportation easier but also changing the economics of ranching. Benjamin and James adapted, finding new markets for their cattle and expanding their operations. Penelope's business acumen proved invaluable as they navigated these changes. Thomas established himself as one of the finest doctors in San Francisco, but he came home to visit whenever he could. He never married, dedicating himself to his practice and his patients, but he was a devoted uncle to his nieces and nephews. Catherine and Roberto had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they eventually took over management of a portion of the ranch that Benjamin and James split off for them. The family remained close, gathering for Sunday dinners and holidays, the grandchildren running wild just as their parents had before them. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully at 86, surrounded by the Nash family who had become her own. Penelope mourned her deeply, remembering how the older woman had welcomed her and helped her find her place on the ranch all those years ago. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Benjamin gave Penelope a gift that made her cry. It was a painting, commissioned from an artist in Virginia City, depicting a young woman standing beside a broken wagon at dawn, with a lone rider approaching on horseback. The scene was rendered in soft colors that captured both the desolation of that moment and the hope of what was to come. So we never forget where we started, Benjamin said, and how far we have come together. Penelope hung the painting in their bedroom where she could see it every day. It reminded her that endings and beginnings were often the same moment, seen from different perspectives. What had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of the life she was meant to live. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their movements slower. But their love remained strong and vibrant, deepened by decades of shared experiences, of facing challenges together, of raising a family and building a legacy. Benjamin developed arthritis in his hands, making it harder to do the physical work of ranching. But he remained involved, advising James and Roberto, and spending hours playing with his grandchildren. Penelope's eyesight weakened, making her fine embroidery difficult, but she could still manage the account books, and she took up teaching the grandchildren, passing on the lessons she had taught their parents. On a warm summer evening, As they approached their 40th wedding anniversary, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quieter now, most of the grandchildren grown or growing. But there was a new generation starting, great-grandchildren toddling around under the watchful eyes of their parents. 40 years, Penelope mused. It seems impossible that it has been that long. Where does the time go? Into living, Benjamin said. Into building something that will outlast us both. Look at what we have created, Penelope. Not just the ranch, but the family, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We built something good and strong and true. We did, she agreed. Together, always together. As the sun set in a blaze of color, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple, Penelope reflected on the improbable journey that had led her here. She had set out on the wagon train seeking a new life in California, carrying dreams that seemed impossibly distant. She had lost her parents, her security, and her direction. She had been abandoned in the wilderness with nothing but fear and a rapidly dwindling hope. But in that moment of deepest despair, when she had been certain she would die alone in the desert, fate had intervened in the form of a rancher looking for stray cattle. Benjamin had not just saved her life that dawn. He had given her a reason to embrace life again. He had offered her not just shelter but partnership, not just safety but love. Their marriage had been built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection that had only grown stronger over the decades. They had faced droughts and harsh winters, economic challenges and personal losses. They had raised 3 children who were now raising children of their own. They had built a ranch that employed dozens of families and contributed to the prosperity of their community. But more than any of that, they had loved each other. Faithfully, deeply, constantly. That love had been the bedrock of everything else they had accomplished. I want you to know, Benjamin said quietly, taking her hand, that every single day of these 40 years has been a gift, even the hard days, because we faced them together. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope, the very best. And you are mine, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My rescuer, my love, my home. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you and to this life we built together. They sat in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, surrounded by the results of 4 decades of hard work and deep love. The ranch house glowed with lamplight. Somewhere inside, their family was gathering for the anniversary celebration. But for this moment, they were content to sit alone together as they had at the beginning. Benjamin eventually stood, offering his hand to help Penelope up. They walked inside together to join their family, to celebrate 40 years of marriage and a lifetime of love. The house was full of voices and laughter, children running between the legs of adults, babies being passed from arm to arm. This was their legacy, their fortune, more valuable than any gold that could be found in California. As Penelope looked around at the faces of her family, each one precious beyond measure, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For the wagon wheel that broke at exactly the right place. For the rancher who happened to be looking for stray cattle. For every choice and chance that had led her to this moment, this place, this family. She had been left behind by the wagon train, and it had seemed like the worst thing that could possibly happen. But it had been the beginning of her greatest adventure, her truest purpose, her deepest joy. She had found not just a reason to stay, but a reason to embrace every moment of the life she had been given. And as Benjamin squeezed her hand and smiled at her across the crowded room full of the people they loved most, Penelope smiled back, her heart full. This was home. This was love. This was the life she was meant to live, and she would not change a single moment of it, not even the scary ones, because they had all led her here. To this man, this family, this beautiful, imperfect, utterly precious life. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, more joys and sorrows, as was the nature of living. But they would face it all together, as they always had, bound by love that had been tested by time and found true. The future stretched before them like the wide open Nevada desert, full of possibility and promise, and they would greet it hand in hand, hearts intertwined, grateful for every moment they had been given and every moment yet to come. Together, always together. Just as it was meant to be from that first moment, when a rancher on a bay horse had ridden out of the dawn and changed her life forever.